Hello, great ones. Welcome to the Live and Be Great podcast. I'm your host, Latanya Sampson McDonald. I am a life coach and a registered marriage and family therapist associate. And this podcast was created to motivate, educate, and inspire all to live and be great. On today's episode, we are talking about how saying you did the best that you could is just not enough. It's not a thing, okay? And specifically, I'm talking to parents, young and old, all right? That certain behaviors of your parenting or parenting styles you had based off of, history, maybe not knowing any better, maybe your own trauma. You may have inflicted a certain type of pain onto your children that they still deal with, even if they're grown, even if it's recent, right? They develop these complexes, and we all know when a parent says something is different than when a stranger is saying something to you, as far as how you end up shaping your perception of yourself. Now, as far as your actions towards other people, your parents cannot be accountable for that, but they can be accountable for the pain and the trauma that they may have caused, whether knowingly or unknowingly. Okay? For example, my own situation with my parents, they would say, like in the past, oh, I did the best I could. I did the best I could. And I would be like, it still hurts. And oftentimes those parents are still doing the same exact thing. And that is why whatever it is a trigger, particularly, right? For example, if you have a parent that maybe you're raised by a single parent, or a parent that you just clearly have identified is the main caregiver, the main breadwinner, or whatever the case may be, is pulling most of the weight when it comes to protecting and providing for the family. That can be a very stressful place to be in. And then when you put in the dynamics of race or sex into it, beliefs into it, that can add a whole different element on top of whatever the regular everyday life stresses are. I know I talk a lot about on this channel about, gentle parenting and not hitting your children, mainly because you have to get a certain type of angry to want to inflict pain onto someone that came from you and isn't old enough to fight back or defend themselves, right? You have to get a certain amount of angry. And oftentimes when you get that angry at your child, it has nothing to do with what that child has done, right? So don't do it. That's my whole thing. Like, get some therapy, go to anger management, but don't do it, because it is a domino effect of so many other problems, like anxiety, like ADHD, like low self-esteem, being in abusive relationships because, hey, I hit you because I love you. Every domestic violence person or a person that's been in a domestic violence relationship was either hit or had been hit. And I'm talking about on both sides, whether you have been violent towards somebody or you had violence done against you, it starts there. Your first domestic violence relationship, domestic meaning in the home relationship, any relationship, right, is usually with your parents if your parents hit. Okay? But those who are listening to my podcast, you already know I don't argue about hit, spank, beat. They're the same thing. Okay? You're not going to convince me psychologically. Science is the data is there. It's the same thing and it inflicts the same type of trauma. It may be expressed in different types of ways, like I said, via mental illness or, being abusive yourself, right? But it's not worth what it cost in the end, just to get your quick validation or your quick release of whatever you got going on in your life, right? It's not worth it, okay? So when we talk about parents saying they did the best that they could, that is not an apology. We got to be very clear on that. I don't know why people think that is. It's like now you're making yourself the victim. Okay, so let's say if you are a parent and you're like in your 60s and you have a child in their 30s or whatnot, and they're bringing up that time where you maybe slapped them in front of everybody because of something they did and you made an example of them, or you may have said like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be an artist. I don't really think you're good at it. You should do something else. That stuff, it stays with you, and it can literally stop people their whole entire life. They could be 80 years old and never had went after their dream based off of what their parents said, right? Okay, so say we bring it back to what I said, that your parents are not responsible for what you decide to do, your behavior after the trauma. No one's responsible for that but you. It's your job to get the help and support and the healing that you need so you don't repeat the same mistakes. But when we're talking about that whole statement, I did the best I could, that is an excuse. Okay? That's an excuse, and usually all your child is asking for is for validation. Yes, this happened to me and it hurt. And oftentimes parents aren't like, sometimes parents can take it as you're calling them a bad person, or you're not acknowledging their, sacrifice. Listen, before you become a parent, I need more people to understand that you're a parent. Once you decide to become one, sacrifice is part of the contract. It just is. Okay? So there is no reward for doing what you're supposed to do as a parent when you decide to take on that responsibility. All right? So this whole, but I gave birth to you, or, you came from my seed, or whatever the case may be, it's not enough. It does not excuse your bad parenting or bad behavior, right? And if there's a whole generation and generation after generation that has been doing the same toxic nonsense just because it was done to them, you are really, really deciding that you are not going to do the work. You're going to be lazy and put all the work that should have been done in the past onto the next generation to have to suffer through and have to fix. Okay? And a lot of this can be avoided if you just acknowledge that, hey, this hurt my child. Just acknowledge it, okay? Because there's a lot of children, me included, that were walking around feeling like they are not worthy of unconditional love, or are not worthy of a supportive parent, not just supportive financially, but supportive mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Was I not worth it? Especially when y'all do that thing that y'all like to do with your grandkids and make them your do-over children. That makes it even worse. And I say this all the time. I think I use this scenario all the time. But that makes it even worse for the relationship between you and your child, but also your child and their child, being your grandchild. Because your actual child is actually looking at you, seeing that you are capable of this love this whole entire time, but for some reason you did not give it to them, right? That resentment of having to do so much, and I do get it, right? They do romanticize marriage, they romanticize jobs, school, everything that is supposedly supposed to make you a good person, supposedly supposed to make you look or appear successful in the world and making a name for yourself. All of that is romanticized. Nobody really knows the hard work that it truly entails unless they actually do it themselves, or if you have honest people, okay, that will be honest about their experiences with these things that are supposed to be stepping stones that make you a good person and a successful person in the world, right? They romanticize it. So I get it. I get that resentment for nobody telling you the truth, that it was going to take so much, that your body was going to change, that your face was going to change, that it was so expensive, that it could be very stressful, that it could be draining, and all of that stuff that comes with being a parent and being responsible for your children. I get it, but that's not their fault. Okay? It isn't. And even in the apology, it's okay to even say that, right? It's okay to say nobody warned me really about what this took and I didn't have it in me. You didn't get the best version of me and I apologize, right? That's an apology versus I did the best I could. It's I apologize, you did not get the best version of me, right? And your child wouldn't care if they didn't have some sort of affection for you, if they didn't want to mend the relationship in some type of way and be close to you. They would not care. All right? Like, people do that every day. People let relationships go every day with no closure, no reconciliation, not a second thought. Every single day, especially about relationships that they don't really care about. But when it comes to that parental relationship, just about everybody is going to, unfortunately, have to use that, right, as some sort of guide when it comes to you becoming who you are. It just is. Your experience, your childhood, how was it, right? And then, let me back up a bit when I said that the reason why my child is a grown adult and they still talking about what happened when they was a kid with me. Like, why do I even have to, I made sure they had this, and this, but why is this even a topic of discussion? Like, this was so long ago. It's because based off of that experience, they shaped in their head that this is what it's going to be, and a certain perception about themselves is negative based off of them holding your word to such a high extent. But also, like I said before, some of you are exhibiting the same behavior that you were in the past, like not being accountable. Right? Like, usually once a parent is not accountable, if it's never been addressed, they stay like that until it's addressed. Okay? And I also want people to say, like, not say, but I also want people to know that just because you have a traumatic past, it does not give you the right to be a jerk to people. It doesn't. All right? The biggest institution for mental illness is the prison system. Okay? Mark my words. Every last person in there, unless they were wrongfully accused, has mental illness. And if they were wrongfully accused, they developed it once they got in there. Okay? Once they got in there, you're definitely going to develop some PTSD, some depression, some anxiety, all of that beautiful mental illness cocktail. Okay? You're going to develop that. But if you know, like I know, based off of every crime you can be convicted of, right? There's some sort of mental dysfunction, some sort of trauma that leads you into that direction. It just does. And you usually don't come out any better. All right. Some of them, listen, just take them one time to get arrested, and that's traumatic enough. Some people, that's their path. Others, not so much. Right? But just because, okay, say your child is like, you weren't affectionate, you never told me you love me, and that really messed with me. And you remind your child that, hey, I didn't get that from my parents, so I did the best that I could. No. That's not how that conversation is supposed to go. Because like I said before, that means you know better, right, than to do that because how it affected you. But I do understand that some people normalize negativity and toxic behaviors to where they're just like, okay, this is the way life is going to be, especially if they've never been shown any different, or they stay in certain circles that, we're creatures of habit, we're creatures of influence. Your whole neighborhood may have emotionally unavailable parents, right? Your whole culture may have the stress of not being able to give the basics to their children, right? That could play a role, but that does not mean that what you did is okay and that you can be entitled to the same treatment, say somebody that is willing to apologize, can have. That's not what that means, right? Regardless of whether you had a traumatic childhood, you are not allowed to pass that on to other people. You go to therapy, you get a life coach, you go on a healing retreat, you pray, you meditate, you do whatever it is you need to do so that you don't become what hurts you, right? So if you find yourself becoming what hurts you, be accountable for that and apologize. Tell your story. You say, instead of, well, I did the best I could, you say, my parents, they weren't affectionate, and I thought that it was okay, and I grew numb to it, and I'm seeing that it's affecting you the same way that it affected me, and I apologize for that. Simple. All right. Like there's plenty of elderly people all day, every day saying, what do I have to apologize for? I shouldn't have to apologize for anything. I gave this person this, I gave this person that, I made sure they had this, I made sure they had that. Does not matter. You are the biggest influence in your child's life. That is a human being that based off of you they're going to make decisions in this world that affect other human beings. So it's way bigger than just, oh, this is what happens in my home and it's going to stay here. It never stays there. It doesn't. No matter how much you try to tight-lip your family and force them to hold secrets, and it always comes out in some form or fashion, right? And if more people were honest about the lifestyle they really want, they wouldn't have children. Because not everybody that has a child is, is a parent. They just aren't. And It's okay to recognize that. Even after the fact, it's okay to recognize that. But you still got to be accountable. Like, it's not the end of the world if you apologize, you know? And no, I can no longer say that your child didn't ask to be here. I can't say that, okay? Because you made them and they decided to come based off of my spirituality, my spiritual journey. You know, you guys will hear some of that, of where I'm at with that in my previous podcast episodes. But let's say, you guys believe like I do, or want to, have some reasoning as to why I believe what I believe. Y'all could Google search, y'all can, listen to previous podcasts, or, send me an email and I'll give you some information. But if we're going with my new belief, which is that you chose your parents and your parents chose you before you even met each other on this earth. Okay, contract was signed, and contract was also signed to forget all of that. And I know a lot of people are like, no, why would I choose this? You did based off of the lessons that you wanted to learn in this lifetime. That's where I'm at with it, right? If it feels a little uncomfortable, it's okay. It'll come when it's supposed to come. Just listen to this podcast again. Save this number 50, 4 episode of Live and Be Great, and come back if ever. Okay? But if that's the case, right? If we've made certain choices, we got to be accountable for those choices. All right? Even in the just expressing to your parent that this hurt, you got to do that, or you will end up like we all do, bleeding on somebody that did not cut you, right? It's important to give the pain to who it belongs to, who caused it. Give it back to them so they can be accountable for it. Not saying, be mean and vindictive and not willing to talk and, don't do that. I'm not saying do that, like do this eye for an eye situation. But I'm saying is have the conversation, especially if somehow, some way it's been brought to your attention that this is affecting you. This is giving you anxiety. A lot of us that have the anxiety, that have the ADHD, that have the depression, how I usually explain it is that anxiety that comes up when there's a project that's due, or you got a performance or a speech to give, or whatever the case may be. That anxiety that comes is that, sorry about that, I was trying to wait till that beeping stopped. The anxiety that comes is being honest. If I do this wrong, somebody is going to come from somewhere and knock me across the head, right? Like, that's the type of feeling that you have. And some people, they even feel like it mimics near-death experiences. That's how bad certain people's anxiety can get. Even though we're aware that, hey, I'm not in a dangerous situation, your spirit and your consciousness, sometimes it doesn't catch up, right? If you don't have tools in place for when you do go there, when you do go to that route and that anxiety is starting to build, that panic is starting to come, or that stress is there. If you don't have certain tools, that is the effect it can have on your whole system, your whole nervous system, based off of that, even though you may not be in that situation. Okay, so there are so many effects that not being accountable, not checking the lies and checking the facts can cause. I apologize if y'all hear that beeping, but there's a lot of there's so many things. All right, so it's important that you work on that. Go to the source of where it started. Go to the source of where you first felt like you weren't good enough. And 9 times out of 10, it comes from, your childhood, especially if, even if your parents weren't there, say you were adopted. Once you find out you adopted, you got those negative thoughts, those cognitive distortions about, well, why didn't they keep me? Even if you find out, hey, I wasn't, prepared to be a parent at the time, it had nothing to do with you being worthy of it or anything, you still may have those feelings. But hey, say if you do find your parent and you find out their story, if you are that parent that had to give your child up for adoption and felt like you were making the best choice that you could, it's okay to apologize and say, I'm sorry that made you feel like you weren't worth my love, my support. It's because you were worth all of that and I didn't have it to give is why I gave you up for adoption. Say it like that. I don't that anxiety, right? That gets passed down from generation to generation, it comes out in ways you don't expect to. And for those who are like, I'm not apologizing for anything, there's a part of you that is a little girl or a little boy that feels like that person your child trying to hold you accountable for your behavior. There's a little part of you that's telling you you're not good enough, that you weren't good enough. So to avoid that feeling coming, you just brush it off, right? Instead of let's address why I'm so uncomfortable apologizing for causing someone I love pain, regardless of the sacrifices I made or I think I made or what I gave up to be their parent. Regardless, there's a deeper issue, right? There's a deeper issue. And I applaud the parents who have done it. My mom included in that, I applaud the parents who were able to do it for their children, apologize to their children to, help mend their hearts and put it back together again and debunk the lies of them feeling like they weren't worthy of the full love and support or that 100% of their parent. But I applaud those people because a lot of those people can never get that apology from their parent, ever. The parent's been gone, right? So it takes a lot for that person to be like, no, like I care about this relationship here. And I don't want my child to feel like that I didn't care about them or that they weren't good enough or whatever the case would be, regardless of whether I tried to show it through making sure they had clothes and food or whatever the case may be. Regardless of whether I tried to show it that way, because I didn't have it, I can acknowledge that because some things happened to me, I was not able to give it to them, and it is okay for me to apologize. Apologizing to your child is apologizing to yourself. You give them the apologies that you deserve because they're part of you, right? They're part of you. And I say it again for those in the back who, may just get triggered by me saying it's okay to apologize or it's okay to be accountable for your actions. I say it in the back. No, you are not responsible for their behavior afterwards. You aren't. Just like your parents are no longer responsible for you repeating the same cycle onto your children. They're no longer responsible for that because it's your job to address that parent, right? Whether you need to write a letter or you need to say it to their face, regardless of whether they 80, 90 years old and you have caught yourself repeating some of the same toxic traits in parenting that they did with you. Give yourself permission to speak on it, right? Another thing that I do want to say is a lot of people will go ahead and say, hey, I forgive my parent. I understand that they did the best that they could, right? Forgiveness does not mean access, okay? It doesn't. You can still set boundaries and forgive somebody. You can still say, okay, you're not going to be in this part of my life based off of you not apologizing or you not being accountable for what you did. This is the boundary. right? Forgiveness does not mean access. It does not mean that they have to be allowed the same privileges as someone who actually respects you and honors you and wants to put in the same effort in the relationship that you want to put in, right? To get that love reciprocated, to get that accountability reciprocated. It does not mean that you do not get to set boundaries. Still set those boundaries. And some parents do not wake up. They don't mend the relationship until that boundary is set, right? Their parents on their deathbed right now that ain't nobody showing up for them. And now they sorry, right? Now they sorry. Now they willing to apologize if you just take them out the retirement home, or if you just take them home from the hospital and take care of them. Now they sorry. Okay? No, like, I don't feel bad for them. They made their decision. Okay? And some people make their decision too late, and every decision that you make, good or bad, you're going to have to be accountable for, whether it's a good consequence or it's a bad consequence. I hope I'm saying that right. That consequence can be good or bad. I have to look it up. But you guys understand what I'm saying, I'm pretty sure. But yes, for those, because I always get asked this all the time by so many different people, whether it's friends, whether it's clients, whoever. I get this asked all the time, especially when they hear about, the success that I've had with certain parent-child relationships, whether they're young or old, right? Or older, I should say. And within my own household with me and my mom, which I love her so much. I love her so much, and I appreciate her story so much more because I was able to teach her how to validate me by me validating her, right? So for those who are afraid to have the conversation, this is how it goes. Okay? So with my mom, she's a Leo. Leos ruled by the ego, right? Whether you believe it or not, they are. So they wear their ego on their sleeve, and if you tell them you have any type of critique for them, they literally think that you calling them a bad person. All right. So what I had to do was I had to have the conversation with my mom when she was asking me, why did I put up this boundary? I had the conversation with her about how, certain things you do, I can no longer trust you with my heart and in my space anymore because you ruin everything, because you put yourself first and you not caring about what I say and how I feel. And, my mom would apologize throughout, my childhood and my adult life, but she had this pattern of the next day she'll come back and make it my fault and go through that whole, I did the best I could thing. Right? The very next day, she would do that. She'd do that with all of us, all of her children. So when you do that, it kind of cracks the wound back open again, like if you getting re-injured. Now, an injury is one thing, but try getting shot in the same place, right? The next day. It's a whole nother, low of low. You sink even deeper. When it comes to certain relationships, right? And it could be very, very psychologically damaging, spiritually damaging to the relationship and on an individual basis or a mental basis for your child. Okay. But when I was able to basically bring her feelings to the surface, because usually the parent that won't apologize is not an adult that's not apologizing. The parent that caused so much trauma and discord within your life, that's not an adult. That's that broken child that was raising you. That's that broken child that's in your face right now that no one is listening to, that is screaming so loud subconsciously that your parent can't hear you over that, right? What that little child is saying is nobody was there for me. Nobody did it for me. Nobody listened to me. Nobody cared about me. So you guys are going to listen. And usually that child, when you don't address that child and validate that inner child, they wreck and run everything. Okay? So talking with my mom about like her childhood and how certain things would make me feel if I was her and my parent did what they did to her, right? Or even, I was upfront about, mom, you doing the same thing to me, or mom, you're doing the same thing to whoever, whatever the case may be. When I was able to acknowledge that little girl in her, right? By showing her, okay, your feelings were valid. Then she's able to see, okay, somebody hears me. So now I can hear them. So if you have a parent that you want to have a better relationship, and it's a parent that brushes off things, it's a parent that sweep things under the rug, first and foremost, it has nothing to do with you and your lack of being worthy. You are always worthy, right? It's just that they didn't feel like they were worthy. They're convinced that they weren't deserving of better, right? When it came to their parents, they took the bait of, I did the best that I could and you should be grateful because I brought you into this world and I made sure you had this, that, and the other. They took the bait and they expect you to take it. You don't have to. Right? What you do is you acknowledge, hey, I know your relationship with grandpa, grandma was like this. Like, let's talk about that. And you give them those emotions, right? That would make me feel this. Even if they say, no, but that was so long ago. No. But that will still make me feel this way. I'm sorry that happened to you. Y'all, it works like the darn key to, what they say, open sesame, just like that. When, the go-to password to get the treasure, when you watch those movies, open sesame, that's how it works. Okay. That little person that's been broken for so long needs a voice, needs to be heard, and then they'll be able to hear you. Okay. Then they'll be able to hear you. So be brave and have those conversations. And also hearing your parents' story, it does help take some of the lies, some of the negative thoughts that you've told yourself for so long. It does help to wash that away. It really, really does when you're able to open that. And then the last thing you make sure that you say is the reason why, this hurt me is because I love you, because I take what you say seriously. I live my life based off of, first and foremost, wanting to make you proud, right? And watch them apologize, right? Say if I didn't care about you, if I didn't want the relationship to be what it is, if you didn't hold a certain place in my heart, there would be no need for an apology, right? But that apology helps put my heart back together again, okay? Now, once they do apologize, y'all could thank me any type of way by supporting the channel, sending me an email, whatever the case may be. You could thank me because it's going to work. I promise. If you just follow each step that I give you, it's going to work, right? And if all else fails, take them to a therapy session. Okay? But it won't. It won't. But I don't know. There was a point in time where I believed that I would never be able to mend the relationship with me and my mother. I don't have a relationship with my dad. It's still very, very, very toxic. But with my mom, I just had a little mustard seed of faith that we could do it. And I trusted that and it happened, right? So sometimes all you have to do is want for it to happen, and the answers for how you get there will come to you. But you got to believe that it can. If you're already believing that it never will happen, then it won't. You've already canceled out the possibility for yourself. So don't do that. If your parents are still living, if they're still here, don't cancel it out. Try, and try again. Something don't work the first time, try it differently and set those boundaries so they see how serious this is for you. All right? Okay. I believe that's all I have for you all today. Thank you again for listening. Don't forget to give yourself permission to live and be great. The Live and Be Great podcast will be airing every other Friday. If you have truly enjoyed this podcast, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving Live and Be Great a chance. Please feel free to share, like, give a review, subscribe on whichever platform that you're listening to right now on iTunes or Apple Podcast, Spotify, Anchor, as well as Google Play. The Live and Be Great podcast is strictly crowdfunded, so if you are interested in becoming a supporter, you can click the link in the description, or you can go to liveandbegreat.com and scroll to the bottom and donate to the Live and Be Great podcast today, so I can continue to give you good and motivational content. Thank you all for listening, and don't forget to give yourself permission to live and be great.